You guys could, would you open up to Mark 4 for me? We're actually going to be in Mark 5 today, but Mark 4, the end of it, verse 35, is where I want to start. Because that gives us a background to the story. So Mark chapter 4, starting in verse 35. Alright, so verse 35 it says, "On that day when evening had come, he said to them, 'Let us go across the other side.'" That's Jesus saying that. "And leaving the crowd, they took him with them in the boat, just as he was, and other boats were with him. And a great windstorm arose, and the waves were breaking into the boat, so that the boat was already filling. But when he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion, and they woke him and said to him, 'Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?' And he awoke and rebuked the wind and the sea. 'Peace, be still.' And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. He said to them, 'Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith?' And they were filled with great fear and said to one another, 'Who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?'" I mentioned this story because a few weeks ago I preached on Jonah at this church, and I was thinking about that story because the story of Jonah points to Jesus so many times in that story. And Jesus himself says that a wicked and adulterous generation seeks signs, but no sign will be given to it except the sign of Jonah. So it's important that we study those stories and look at them and see how it points to Jesus. And one of those moments, Jonah, who is a prophet of God, is called to preach to Ninevites, who are pagan people who don't know Jesus, don't know the Lord. They just do horrible things, sacrifice their children. And Jonah is called to go and preach to them a message of repentance. And Jonah doesn't want to. He turns away and he runs from God. And that's the Bible story that we have where he's on this boat and he's swallowed by a fish after they throw him into the sea. But shortly before that, there's this amazing part because there's this great storm that comes aboard. And the boat is like about to be sunk by the waves and everything. And all these sailors are frantic, throwing things overboard so that the ship doesn't sink. And Jonah, it's amazing because he's asleep in the bottom of the ship. And he's oblivious to what's going on. And, they come down and they say, "Don't you care about us that we're perishing?" And then they say, "Call out to your God, maybe he'll save us." And it's amazing because every time I hear that story, I think about this moment here. Because this is the exact same situation Jesus was in, and his disciples come and they say, "Don't you care that we're perishing?" And he gets up and he rebukes the storm. But then it's interesting because he says, "Why are you afraid?" I think that's so amazing because he's asking this question to them like, "Why are you afraid? You know that you have me here," is what he's pointing at there. And the story of Jonah, it's this idea of God calling his son, a prophet of God, to preach a message. And here we'll see that it's the same exact situation where God is calling Jesus to preach a message to someone, okay? And we open up in chapter 5 of Mark. And where they were going, they were in the Sea of Galilee, which is north. It's in northern Israel. And it separates, if you can think about it, modern-day Israel from Jordan and countries like that. It's a border, so they're going across it on the eastern side into pagan territory. Okay, that's where they're going on this boat. So we open up in Mark 5, verse 1. It says, "They came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gerasenes. And when Jesus had stepped out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. He lived among the tombs, and no one could bind him any more, not even with a chain. For he had often been bound with shackles and chains, but he wrenched the chains apart and broke the shackles in pieces. No one had the strength to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and on the mountains, he was always crying out and cutting himself with stones." I'll pause here. And there's really no way for me to put you guys in this situation right now. But if you can imagine, it is night out. Okay, it says on the day when evening had come in Mark 4:35. That's when they set out. So right at the beginning of night, they set out on this boat. Then there's a giant storm that terrifies them. And Jesus calms it and says, "Why are you afraid?" And then he takes them to a place where, if you can imagine, it's pitch black. And it's just nothing. They can't see anything. And then they pull up, and it says as soon as Jesus steps off of the boat, they hear screams from this crazy man. Think about that for a second. That would be terrifying. It's like all these horror movies that it's like, that would be crazy to hear that. And think about what the disciples were thinking at that time. Like, what have you just put us into here? We were afraid before, now we're really afraid here. So they're there, and there's this man crying out. And then it says, it's describing the man, it says that he lives among the tombs, no one can bind him, that he sits there, he's naked, and he just cuts himself and bruises himself with stones. And this is this man's life. He's tormented by demons. He's screaming. It says no one can bind him. So they just leave him there. And these tombs in that area were used for graves. So he lives in a cemetery, basically. And he is the crazy guy who lives in a cemetery. But this time he's demon-possessed. And he's super strong and no one can bind him. And so we see this picture of this man. Just imagine that guy. What he would have looked like. How he would have behaved. It's just, it's incredible to think about it. This is where Jesus was going. And Jesus says that he did everything that God wanted him to. So this is exactly where God wants him to be at this moment. Is to encounter this man. And so it's a story. I hope you guys can feel that just the terror that they must have had at this man. And the people of that region were just leaving him alone. They just didn't care. They just like, go live among the caves. So he's there. And in verse 6 we pick up. When he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and fell down before him. And crying out with a loud voice, he said, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you by God, do not torment me." For he was saying to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." That's Jesus saying that. So this guy, he sees Jesus from afar, and he sprints. It's a dead sprint. Okay? But again, think about how terrifying that would be if you're sitting there watching this. If you can't even see anything, all you can hear is probably just screams. And it's getting closer. And then he goes to him, and he falls down before him, and now they can see him, and it's this possessed man. And he's screaming out, crying out, "What do you have to do with us, Jesus? Don't torment us." And they also call him Son of the Most High God. So if we pause here and look at in terms of the theology that this demon had, it was actually great. He knew that Jesus was the Son of God, and he knew that he was going to be tormented by him. So again, if you want to look at that and say, well, is that what it means to know Jesus? No, because these guys know him, and they shudder, as it says in James. So that's not what it means to know Jesus. It's actually a following, and it's a heart issue here. But so this demon has great theology, and he's crying out to Jesus, don't torment me. And I think that's incredible that we see this sovereignty here where he has to run, and then he also has to bow to Jesus. If you see that, we just sang that psalm that was talking about that. And it's just amazing to see that this demon has to run and then bows before Jesus. Okay? So, as we continue on in verse 9, it says, "And Jesus asked him, 'What is your name?' He replied, 'My name is Legion, for we are many.' And he begged him earnestly not to send them out of the country." So, pause there for a second. So he said, "My name is Legion." And just thinking about that, that's kind of strange to call yourself Legion. And that region there, not to rhyme or anything, but over there, the Romans, this was an occupied territory, okay? This area, they would station all these troops there because the Romans were always fighting battles over, on the east side of the world here to them. And so they would station these legions there. And a legion is 6,000 soldiers. So this man is saying that, or these demons are saying that we're a legion inside of him. So there is a vast amount of demons, thousands of demons is what he's saying. And the crazy thing about these legions is that they were known for their horrific acts against people. They would rape, they would steal, they would murder while they were stationed there. So there's also something else going on here where he's saying, there is just torment inside of me. So it's probably the demons saying this, but that's what they're referring to. They're saying we're many and we're also terrorizing people. That's what they do. And so that's what this man has inside of him. And this is what Jesus is encountering face to face here. And this is crazy here, this story. But so in verse 10, picking back up, it says, "And he begged him earnestly not to send them out of the country." So that's the demons talking. "Now a great herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside. And they begged him, saying, 'Send us to the pigs, let us enter them.' So he gave them permission. And the unclean spirits came down and entered the pigs, and the herd, numbering about 2,000, rushed down the steep bank into the sea and were drowned in the sea. So pausing there for a second. It's kind of strange if you think about it. So there's this crazy man comes out of the tomb. He has thousands of demons inside of him. Runs to Jesus and says, "Don't torment me." But then it's kind of strange because he asks him not to send him away out of the country. He says, "Let me go into these pigs over here." And there's a lot of speculation about why this guy would say that, why these demons don't want to leave the country. There's several ideas. One is that they don't want to leave the country because it's so overrun with sin and things like that, so they don't want to be sent out. They want to stay there. And I heard a great commentary on this from John Calvin, and he took the most unique view I've ever seen on this. And I really like it because what it shows is how demonic they are, these demons, okay? How wicked. Because sometimes, I don't know what it is, but in my head, I don't think of them as terrible as they are. And I think we really need to have that picture of these people, these things are so wicked that their entire lives are spent trying to damn people to hell. That's what their entire lives are spent for. Satan knows that he's going to be destroyed, yet he spends his time trying to kill people that way, eternally. And these demons are the same exact thing. They're following orders here. And so we see this story of these men. They hate people, these demons. They hate people. They're in this man, tormenting him. His life means nothing to anyone. And that's what they say, "Jesus, don't send us away. Let us stay here." Okay? And it's just interesting because John Calvin, I'm going to quote him now, he says, "The demons have such a rage for mischief that they are always like lions in search of prey. They are grieved when they have no one to torment." So that's why we see them crying out here, "Jesus, don't kill us. Send us into these pigs." Now, why the pigs? That's something interesting too. Number one, this proves that this is a Gentile area because Jews don't eat pork. So there's pigs here, pig farmers, and also the pigs in that region were worshipped as gods. So they were used for sacrifice and things like that. And so there are these thousands of pigs over there, and they say, "Send us into that." Now, something interesting to think about is, in this region they don't know God or anything. And as a demon, what they're trying to do is get them to stay that way. And what is crazy is that they have the idea, send us into these pigs because we're going to rush them down on this hill and kill them. That wasn't Jesus commanding them to run down the hills. Think about that. That was the demons themselves in the pigs causing them to rush down the hill and die. So why would they want to do that? Well, the first thing is, you think about in Job. Think back to the story of Job. When Satan, he comes and God goes, "Have you seen my servant Job? He's an awesome guy. Loves me with all of his heart." And what does Satan say to him? He says, "That's because you've given him so much. If you took those things away from him, he would curse you to your face." That's what he says. So what's the first thing that Satan takes away? His cattle. Takes away his crop here and everything like that. And that's the first attack, was your possessions. And so that's always going to be Satan's first attack because he knows that people are so tied to their possessions. And so with these guys, the demons, they go into the pigs and kill them because that's the easiest way for people to curse God. "I love you, God, if you're providing everything for me. If my pigs are healthy and they're not dying, I love you. But then if they die, I hate you," is what they're saying. And that's exactly what happens here. They take these pigs, they kill them, and we see later that's exactly what happens. But that's how the demons are that's how they're working here. And I want you to see the satanic nature of that. How much they hate people. How much they hate us. That they're willing to even standing before God, they're willing to try to still cause people to hate him. And that they do this act, and then these farmers, they're upset about that, but it's just insane to think about it. That's exactly what they were doing. And these farmers, they lose their possessions, but I'll talk more about that here. So, continuing on here, in verse 14, it says, "The herdsmen fled and told it in the city and in the country. And people came to see what it was that had happened. And they came to Jesus and saw the demon-possessed man, the one who had the legion, sitting there, clothed and in his right mind. And they were afraid. And those who saw it, or those who had seen it, described to them what had happened to the demon-possessed man and to the pigs. And they began to beg Jesus to depart from their region. So now, the people who saw this from afar, they probably heard their pigs run into the water there. And they run and tell everybody, like, look, something crazy's going on here at the tombs. And they come, all these people, and they're telling them, you remember that crazy guy who was always there? Now he's like in his right mind. He's actually clothed, and he's just sitting there listening to Jesus. Can you imagine seeing that? The crazy guy that you know, just picture someone who you think is the craziest person you know, just sitting there now, completely sane, and they're listening to Jesus. That's such a miracle in itself right there. But the crazy part is that that's not what they're concerned with. They don't come back and they're not happy about that. They're telling them, and guess what he did to the pigs? Guess what he did to them? He caused them to die. And so then it says, instead of being concerned about this man and rejoicing about this guy, they beg him, Jesus, leave us. We don't want you here. You see, before you were here, we were great. We had all these pigs. They weren't dying. We had peace. You weren't upsetting things here. We had these 1,000 pigs, and now they're dead because of you and because of this one man. And so they say, Jesus, they beg him to leave. That's the closest they will ever be to God. And he was literally feet from them. And instead of, praising him, instead of asking him, Jesus, come do this miracle to my other friend who is, sick or something. Heal this person. No, they say, leave us. We want to be healthy and wealthy here. And you don't cause that to happen. You cause the opposite here. All for this one guy. All because of that. And so we see these people are so angry and they want him to leave. And it's just so sad to see that. That is incredibly sad. And so they ask him to leave. And this is the most amazing part of the story to me. This is my favorite part here in verse 18. It says, as Jesus, as he was getting into the boat, the man who had been possessed with the demons begged him that he might be with him. Isn't that amazing? I love that verse. It shows you what Jesus has done for this man. He's cast out 1,000 demons from him. He is now right in his mind. He can now see Jesus for who he is, and he just wants to be with him. I think that is so beautiful. That's such a great picture of what happens to us when we start to follow Jesus. We just want to be next to him. I think that's amazing. And it just shows the complete transformation of this guy in a second. Jesus is just like, he's just there and he wants to go with him in the boat. But then Jesus says in verse 19, he did not permit him, but said to him, go home to your friends and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you. And he went away and began to proclaim in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him. And everyone marveled. So he wants to follow Jesus. He's getting on the boat and he says, no, doesn't let him. At first that might seem strange, like why would Jesus not let him come with it? But you see, he's got bigger plans for this guy. There's a bigger plan going on here. He says, go and tell your friends, your family, everyone you know about what I've done for you. So this guy, the most unlikely character in the scriptures, is now the first missionary to the world. Think about that for a second. This is the first guy. This is the first Paul. It was a man who 20 minutes ago was naked, has scars all over himself, bruises himself, self-mutilation, and now he's in his right mind, and Jesus is telling him, you go represent me. That's incredible. That is just beyond explanation. And think about the testimony that he would have. That's undeniable. These people in this region had to have known about crazy Frank in the caves, who no one can bind, who, if you go near him, will kill you. They had to have known about him. It had to have been like a legend around there. And now this is him. And that's what he has to bring to these people. He has his testimony here about what Jesus has done for him. And that is amazing. And that's what Jesus wants for him. The following of Jesus, which is exactly what he wanted to do. I want to follow you. Following for him meant going and proclaiming Jesus. That's what it meant to him. So it's different for every person when Jesus gives you what he wants for your life. And I think that is an amazing story here of what this guy has been brought from. And it's a picture of us, okay, where, we're just trapped, we're tormented by Satan before we know Jesus. And then he rescues us, and now we want to follow him. And then he gives us a mission here. And that's what this guy has done here. But I want to turn it here, and I want to pause for a second and just look at this man. Think about this poor man here who was tormented by it. Think about his family. Think about that for a second. That's somebody's son out there, or somebody's brother. That's just insane to think about. That this family now that's my son in those cases there. And now Jesus has freed him, and now he can go back to that family. He's set free from that slavery that he was in, that Satan had caused him to be in. And this man was so unlikely. Everybody had given up on him. They put him in the cemetery, tried to chain him up like a dog. That's what they were trying to do. And he would just break free. He would cut himself. It's probably the first person he had seen in a while was Jesus. And then he gets set free from this. But how unlikely a character to have this happen. I want to play a clip here, okay? Let me preface it. There's an organization together that is called I Am Second, okay? And I hope you go to the website, just iamsecond.com, and it's just a bunch of testimonies. They're famous people, athletes, just anybody who says, I am second, Jesus is first. Okay, that's what the campaign's about. I am second, Jesus is first. And there's a character here who I remember when this occurred. This is a famous guy, okay? It's going to be shocking at first when you see him because he has a shocking appearance. But I want you to be thinking about the crazy man in the tombs here, where if you saw him, you would go, that guy needs Jesus, but I'm too afraid to tell him. Okay? That's who this guy is going to be. I remember when this happened, I was like 14, and there was a group called Korn, which is a rock group, heavy metal, very satanic. They went on tour with Marilyn Manson, they were just satanic, this group. Okay? And this was a member of that group, and I'm going to let him share his testimony here. I'm going to sit down for a second. It's about 7 minutes long. I'll come back up here. That is just phenomenal, that story. Like, I found that, and I watched it, that's probably my 4th time watching that now. And I remember that day. It was breaking news on MTV. I came home from school, and they're like, the group Korn is breaking up because Brian, his nickname was Head, Brian Head Welch is leaving, and he's fled to the Jordan River, and he's getting baptized. He's become a Christian. I just remember going, what? I know that guy. That guy is crazy looking. I can't even imagine what other people were thinking. That's insane. And I think that was one of the best pictures I could have had for what this guy was like. Where it's just completely a night and day difference into who a person was. And that story is so beautiful because he's talking about, I was giving up his career for his daughter. His daughter's like, for me? Just making her feel so special. Because he's like, God showed me this love, so I want to show that to my daughter. And I think that is so beautiful there. And such a perfect picture of what God can do in someone's life with just one verse. And that's where I want to take this next step. Think about how that started. That's what blows me away about this story. This guy, his life is going out of control. He knows it. He's got this severe drug addiction. And what causes this thing to start rolling? It was his real estate agent who goes, I'm sorry, man, I don't mean to be weird. I don't mean to, I've never done this before, but a verse spoke to me. All he did, he was just seeing a problem, seeing that this guy's life is way out of control, and he says, I read this verse, maybe it can help you. And he just showed him that, It's Matthew 11:28. It simple verse, but it's amazing in what Jesus is saying there. And that's exactly what he needed to hear. So I think about the faithfulness of this real estate broker to God. Think about that for a second. Put yourself in his shoes. Because if you're sitting there and you're looking at a guy like that sitting across from you, who you know hates Jesus. Their group makes songs against God all the time. I mean, he said the one song's name, and it's just, you know that he's probably not going to accept it, but you feel like God is calling you to say that. You know, this verse just spoke to me. I don't know if you're going to do anything with it, but it's Matthew 11:28. And then to see what God was doing with that. Because he was weary, he was burdened, and he knew it. Deep down, he knew all those things. But he just needed something to start that. And I just think about that guy's faith to be able to stand in front of that guy and say, you know, I think this verse might help you. And that is what's so powerful about the story, I think, as a Christian looking at it, because I go, man, that's all it took. It was just that one verse. And look at what God has done through his life. If you don't know anything about him, now he makes Christian music now, and he gets to go on tour with these people who would never, ever hear the gospel any other way than through him. And you look at that now he's a missionary for Jesus, and he's the most unlikely looking person. If we're to judge him by just the surface, we would go, he looks crazy. You know? But he is actually representing Jesus to all these people. He's got an autobiography, which is amazing, which if you know someone struggling with drugs, I would get for them, because it is so shocking when you see him on the cover, and it's called Save Me From Myself, and he just describes, you know, just everything that happened in the process and what God has brought him through. And so it's an amazing story. And I just look at the faithfulness of that one guy to say, you know, I think this verse is sticking out. So that's what, you know, I challenge with us today is when we look at our friends, our family, co-workers, and we look at the stories that we just talked about. Think about there's a boat that these disciples are on with Jesus. Stormy, he says, he calms the storm. Nothing, it's just like he just speaks to it. That's what he does. And nothing, it's just still. And he says, why are you afraid? You have nothing to be afraid of. And then he takes them to a place where they should be terrified. And shows them again, you have nothing to be afraid of. I have the power to do all these things. If you just trust the message, which Jonah did not. He did not trust the message of God. It ended up being where the people did repent. And then we have a faithful son in Jesus, who God is sending to one person who has 1,000 demons inside of him. And he speaks to him. He just shares with him his love, casts the demons out, and then the guy wants to follow him, and he says, no, go tell the world about me here. And you just look at the faithfulness of God there. You look at what Jesus is asking him to do, and just these amazing stories, and Jesus is saying, don't fear. You have nothing to fear. And so that's the message. I want you guys to walk away with this, saying, okay, who is the person that I can share this with? Or maybe who is God calling me to share with? That's what we need to really be praying about. Because there may be times when you know you might supposed to be saying something, but then you don't. But it's okay, because God we can repent, and he gives us second chances. And so who is that person that maybe we should be talking to, but maybe we're just a little afraid of? Because these stories should teach us that we have nothing to fear in that realm. And we have nothing to fear that way. And that's what's so beautiful about Jesus, and that he can change anyone in a second. No matter where no one is too far gone. No one. So that's what's amazing, and I pray that you guys will get that. So let me close out in prayer here.